Last Sunday night on 60 Minutes, they did a little special about a new telescope. The telescope will be launched on December 22nd. It is the James Webb telescope. It is 100 times more powerful than the Hubble telescope, which was launched about 30 years ago. Now, on 60 Minutes, they said this telescope is going to show us the past of the cosmos. We know that when we see stars in the sky, especially even our favorite star, the sun, that we're not really seeing that burning brightly as it is today. It takes 8 minutes for the light from the star to get here. So from the sun to get here. So when we see the sun, we're never seeing it in real time. We're seeing it the way it was 8 minutes ago. Now, astronomers tell us that in perfect conditions, you can see 9,000 stars with the naked eye. Of course, we don't live anywhere near perfect conditions. Can you imagine 9,000 stars with the naked eye? Some of those stars, the light from them, have been traveling toward us since the day Jesus was born or earlier than that. Thousands of years it takes some of these far-off stars for the light to get here. So when we see a star, we truly are looking into the past. We're seeing hundreds or thousands of years back in time. That's an amazing thought. It kind of baffles me how all that works. Some of the stars we see in the night sky are already dead. Astronomers believe that Betelgeuse, one of the brightest stars that we see at night, died a long time ago, but the light is just now getting to us. So the reporters on 60 Minutes said that this James Webb telescope, it'll get up there, I don't know where, a long, long way from here, and they believe it might be able to send us pictures of what they called that let there be light moment in time when it all began. Tough thing to get our mind wrapped around. Light coming from that far away, just now reaching us. Light traveling in the darkness, one of the most prevalent images that prophets use about God's love and grace. First time it's used is by Balaam the prophet. He was famous because his donkey talked to him. But Balaam said there's going to be a star rise in Israel that will save the nation of Israel. And then we read Isaiah this morning, or the Stroop family did. Behold, those who sit in darkness have seen a great light. Isaiah's belief that that light is coming to all of us. Later on in Isaiah, he said, there's coming a day when we will not need the sun or the moon because the glory of the Lord will be our light. Revelation picked that up in the New Testament and repeated it. And then Malachi, the last book in the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, Malachi says that one day the sun will rise with healing in its wings, is the translation most of us are familiar with, but it probably meant healing in its rays, that there's something coming, a dawning. After Malachi gave that prophecy, however, there's no biblical record of any prophetic word for 400 years. There's no prophets arise in Israel that at least we know about for 400 years after Malachi, until this event that Cheryl read to us a little earlier. Zachariah becomes the first prophet in 400 years. Remember, he lost his ability to speak when he did not believe the angel about the baby that was coming to him, and then the baby said, you name him John, and when the baby came, all the relatives said, no, let's name him after Uncle Ezekiel or Cousin Fred, and he goes, nope. Wrote it down. He couldn't speak. The baby's name is John. And when he said that, he got his speech back. And he picked up the baby and he held it up and he gave the first prophetic word in 400 years. You can see it here as he says, blessed be the Lord of God of Israel. He's looked favorably on his people and he's redeemed them. And he goes on to talk about the promises of God that were made to Abraham. All those years ago, 2,000 years before Zechariah uttered these words. He said God promised Abraham that God would bless him and his descendants and that he would use his descendants to bless the whole world. But that hadn't happened when Balaam prophesied. He was still seeing it way out on the horizon. It had not happened when Isaiah prophesied or Malachi. They had all been waiting. They'd all been waiting for the promises to be kept, for the nation of Israel to be blessed, and for them to become a blessing to the world. And when Zachariah uttered these words, that had not yet occurred. They were having a rough time in Israel. You remember they were occupied by the Roman forces, who were brutal to them often. And their own religious leadership was corrupt. They couldn't trust them. And then they had drought after drought. They had famine. They had plagues. They had problem after problem. And war was always just a breath away. It was a very perilous time in which to live. It certainly didn't feel like God had blessed them or was using them to bless the world. But then Zechariah says, that promise that's been coming to us through the centuries, like the light of a star, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And then he got to raise that baby up and say these words, the tender mercy of God, the dawn from on high, will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. It's here. It's here. That light we've been waiting for is now shining. When I turned 50, my older sons, I have 3 older sons, and my 3 nephews who live out in Denver decided that I needed to hike up a mountain to celebrate the fact that I had lived for half a century. They chose a trail that was, they said, 4 hours long. And even in my frail and dilapidated condition at 50, which seems like not that long ago, but it was, I thought I can do a 4-hour hike. And I still believe I could have if those bozos who were related to me had known the trail they were supposed to take. But they took me on 2 wrong trails. We walked 2 hours, and then they said, wait a minute, this is the wrong trail. And we had to get off of that. We went on another trail, walked 2 hours, and they go, well, this doesn't look right. And one of them said, this is the wrong trail. When we finally got on the right trail, 4 hours from this camp, you see, that was supposed to be spectacular and nobody's going to be there, and it's going to be great, Uncle John. And when we finally got on the right trail, the sun was beginning to climb. We went up that trail for 2 hours, and then it was getting dusky. You know, you could not see very well. And part of our company said, we better leave the old man behind and get up there so we can break camp in some light and build a fire and you know, make things all right. So they, whoever drew the wrong straw had to walk with me. They left 2 behind because they thought if he dies, it'll take 2 of them to get him out of here. And so they left 2 with me, and the other ones went on. They were much more agile and, you know, younger and able to go, and they just took off. And I'm telling you, by that time, I think I had walked 6, 7, 8 hours. I was worn out. And it was all, you know, like this. And I would get up there, and I'd have to sit down and catch my breath. And they'd go, you ready, Uncle John? Yeah, I think I can go on a little farther. And then it got to be complete darkness. And I sat on this rock in that complete darkness. And I imagined out in those woods that there were grizzly bears looking at me, and mountain lions and timber wolves and deranged moose. They were all out there waiting to attack me at any second. And I took odds in my mind. How am I going to die here? You think it's going to be the attack of a wild animal? Or do you think I'm just going to have a heart attack and that's going to be it? Or do you think in this darkness, I'm just going to stumble off the path and plunge to my death? I didn't know which way it was going to be. Finally, we were gone another hour or so, and it got to gravel. It was just sheer gravel. And we began to go down, descend on this gravel, slipping and sliding. And I honestly thought in my mind, well, this is it. This is it. Here comes Jesus with like a big slipper slide. I'm flying into heaven. And we got to the bottom of that gravel, and it stopped. And I was catching my breath, and I looked through the woods, and I could see the campfire. It was glowing. The promise of safety and warmth was there. Norvell Gildenhouse is a New Testament scholar. He taught at Princeton and Cambridge, and he says that something like that is the backdrop behind what Zechariah prophesied here, that the dawn from on high will break upon us to give light to those who sit in darkness. He said this probably was based on the Jericho road. I don't know if any of you ever been to the Jericho Road, but I haven't, but I've seen pictures of it. I know a little bit about it. They say there's a very narrow road. It runs up from Jericho to Jerusalem or down from Jerusalem to Jericho. It's a narrow path, many places with sheer rock on one side and a plummeting cliff on the other. And so when people went on there, you know, that's where the Good Samaritan story was based. Often you get thieves because they can pinch you up against the wall and you got nowhere to go. The mountain's there. You don't want to jump off the cliff. So they catch you there, or there are wild animals. Now, Gildenhigh said that everybody tried to make that journey in the daytime for obvious reasons. But every once in a while, somebody would get out there and run into some trouble and get delayed, and they'd be on that path when darkness fell. Gildenhigh said when they get on that path and the darkness falls, whereas you can't see anything, the travelers would just stop in the middle of the road. They would not try to go on because they could take, you know, just a little bit of the wrong turn and off they'd go to their death. So they'd sit there huddled in the darkness, watching for wild animals or thieves or criminals. And when the full moon would rise, if it were that time of the month, or if not, they had to wait for the sun, the first little light of the dawn to come. There would be such relief in them, we're going to make it. We who sit in the darkness have seen the risen light, we're going to make it. Gildenhigh says that's the backdrop here, that these folks who were having such a rough time and had had it for 2,000 years, who've been waiting on the light to come. Balaam said it's coming. Isaiah said it's coming. Malachi said it's coming. Zachariah says we're right here. It's coming. It was like seeing the dawn rise when you think this might be your last moment on earth in darkness. And here it comes, the light of Christ, he said. He said this light is going to bring us salvation. It's going to bring us the forgiveness of all of our sins. It's going to redeem us from the bad choices we've already made. It's going to let us worship God without fear of punishment. It's going to lead us in the way of peace. It's going to be a light in the darkness. It's going to help us walk through the shadow of the valley of death. It's going to take care of all of our issues. The light is here. And Jesus said, I am the light of the world. You remember that? He says, here it is. I'm here. I'm the one with the voice of salvation. In John 3, he says, the light has come into the world, but people stay in the darkness because their deeds are evil. I imagine that just blows Isaiah's mind. Balaam's mind. I can kind of picture them up in heaven, you know, Balaam and Isaiah and Malachi and Zachariah, and they're going, can you believe these people? We waited for hundreds, thousands of years for the light to come, and then God kept that promise, and Jesus was born, and the people preferred the darkness. In Marilyn Robinson's book, Lila, she tells a story about a young runaway boy who stays in a shed out on the outskirts of a little town called Gilead, Iowa. And he is discovered by Lila, the central figure of the book, who is also a runaway. But after she was a runaway, through a series of very fortunate events, she meets and marries a very gentle and kind pastor. Her life is much different. When she's out looking at the pelicans, she comes on this old shed that once she stayed in, and she sees that boy. And she says, come with me. I know a town where people are kind. My husband will help you. Come, we'll have food. There'll be shelter. And the boy says, no, I've committed a crime. If I go into town, they'll arrest me. I'm not going. I'm going to stay right here. And after begging him, and he said no, Lila went on into town, and she told her husband, and her husband got his colleague, another minister in town, and they gather up food and clothing and a blanket or two, and they go back out there to that shed. But it's dark now. They can't hardly see. They have a flashlight, and they shine it out in the darkness, and that boy, when he sees the light coming, he fears it's coming to do him harm, and he runs deeper into the woods. And they come and they put all the stuff in the little cabin, and they shout out for him to come and get the stuff, but he thinks they're there to do him harm, and he runs deeper and deeper in the darkness and never gets the generosity given to him. I think Isaiah and Malachi Balaam and others would say, that is the scourge of our generation. Here comes God with light of salvation and forgiveness, eternal life, all the gifts we so desperately need. And yet so many folks continue to run in the darkness, afraid of God or afraid of embarrassment over what they've done or afraid of having to change. We have a million reasons that we prefer the darkness to the light. And yet that light keeps shining. You remember John, you remember the first part of John, the light shines in the darkness and the darkness cannot extinguish it. Cannot extinguish it. So even though people prefer the darkness, the light keeps shining. The light keeps shining. And I'm here to tell you that you carry that light. You carry that light. And some of you, you are the only light somebody has right now. You're the difference between hopelessness and some hope. Can we get an amen to that? You're the difference between loneliness and somebody loves me. You're the difference between nothing is ever going to work out right, and I got a God that loves me who is working to bring me life even then. Yesterday, all of you who were up here providing food for those who came, in a lot of those lives, things have not gone well. Things are not going well. They don't know how it's all going to work out, and you provided the light of Christ to them yesterday. Just a little bit. But it pierced that darkness. It came to them through the promises of God. Our sister church, University Christian Church, has just voted to welcome a family from Afghanistan, a refugee family. And it's a big commitment, takes a lot of time and money, but they've done it. And for that small family who has been running from terror and deprivation, this act of that church is light shining in the darkness, and the darkness cannot put it out. This week, Congregations United helped a woman who was running from domestic abuse. She came to the lunch and said, I got to get some help. I can't go back home. And they responded and found her some emergency places to stay. And then an old friend of hers called her, someone she hadn't talked to in years. The friend said, God just put you on my heart. How are things going with you? And she said, not so hot. And she told her all about it, and the woman said, I tell you what, I have a second house that I don't use. And I want you to, it's in New York, I want you to go up there and stay. And the woman said, I don't have any way to pay you rent. She said, I don't want any money. I want you to stay and be safe until your life gets stabilized. That's the light in the darkness. Can you hear that? You may be the kind of person that just wants to talk about the darkness. How bad it is. Here we go. Saturday Night Live was canceled last night. We're going back to virtual in some of our schools. Some NBA games are not going to happen. Oh, here we go again. Right? You get that feeling, don't you? Or you may want to talk about all the dark, because there is so much darkness in the world. Every week there's a new story that is just crushing in its bleakness. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about that light that was promised us 4,000 years ago, that traveled and appeared in Jesus Christ, and that we have the privilege now of sharing with a world that is so in need. We went to Lola Love's funeral on Monday, and we learned something about her, that one day she found out that her next door neighbor died at the age of 39. She was bowling, she had an embolism, and she died at the age of 39, leaving two young boys, 10 and 8. Their father was already sick, and Lola Love went over there and got those boys, and she fed them every day. She did their homework with them. She took them in as her own. In fact, one of those boys, who is now a man about my age, said, I don't refer to Lola as my neighbor. I refer to her as my mother, because she stepped in and she took care of me. She was light in the middle of my darkness. That's the way the light works. That's the way Christ works. That's the way God uses you. It's a miracle of light that comes through you to people in your lives. It's a promise of God, ancient, generations old. That's the miracle of you and what you're doing in this world. On December 10th, when the weather reports became dire in Mayfield, Kentucky, a man by the name of Chris Crawford got worried about his neighbors. They lived right across the highway from him, and he knew they were Amish. And he knew, therefore, they had no phone, they had no car, they had no television, and probably did not know of any of the dire storm warnings that this man was so clear on. So he went across the road. It was a mother and father, and they had 4 children. And he said, you all come with me to my house. I have a basement. You need to get out of this double wide that you're in. Come with me. But the family said, no, the baby's already asleep. The kids are all settled. We don't want to disrupt everybody. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. And he begged them, but they just didn't agree with him. And so Chris Crawford went back over to his house. And then the storm blew in, and it was far worse than anybody had thought it would be. And when the winds just began to die down a bit, he thought, I got to go check. So he put a headlamp. You know what those are? They stretch over your head. It has a little light in the front because it was so dark. And he crossed that road again, and he went to where the trailer had been, and the trailer was not there. He said there's just splinters. It looked like the trailer had blown up. And he thought all is lost. But as he turned his head in that darkness, he saw little Ammon, 8-year-old Ammon, a boy. He was standing right there coming out of the bushes towards that light. He was barefoot, and he went and grabbed him and hugged him and said, where's the rest of your family? Ammon said, I don't know. And then he went with Chris, and they went out into the weeds, and they found little Sarah. She was covered with debris, but she was alive, and they began to take the debris off and picked up Sarah, and Chris held Sarah, and as he comforted her, he heard this baby crying, a baby crying. And he followed the sound of that baby, and it was down in a ravine. It was wet. It was cold. It was only in a diaper, but Chris Crawford picked him up and carried little Ben back to safety. All 3 of those children were saved. Now, there's tragedy in this story. The mother and father and 2 other children died in that storm. And you may say, oh, well, that's so horrible. It is. You can't get much more. But don't miss the light in this story. Not a one of those people should have survived. And yet they did, because Chris Crawford brought the light into the darkness and rescued those children. That was Christ's light, whether Chris called it that or not. And Christ's light comes through you to the people of your lives all day long. You are a miracle of Christmas when you share that saving light of Christ. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. I don't know if anybody is here today or is watching online and just feels like your whole life is just swallowed up in darkness. You say, oh, I don't know, preacher, I don't see much hope. Well, I'm here to tell you that there is one that loves you more than you can possibly imagine, and that is Jesus Christ. And he is here today, and if you call out to him, if you ask him to come into your life and help you, if you receive his Spirit, he will forgive your sins. He will redeem you from whatever bad choices you have made. He will strengthen you and lead you in the way of light and peace, and he will one day walk you through that valley of the shadow of death into the heavenly kingdom. I encourage you to ask that Christ to come into your heart. You can always reach out to us. You can talk to me, or you can email me. You can ask for my help or anybody's help that already knows the Lord, and they will do their best to shine light upon you. Oh, Lord, thank you for your light. Thank you for keeping your promises. Yes, it took a long while to get here, but you got here. And yes, we thank you for it. You've been here a long while in the form of Christ. Help us, oh Lord, to see that we are miracles, Christmas miracles, every one, and to share your light with the people of our lives who still sit in darkness. Give us that grace. Thank you for that privilege. And thank you most of all for shining your light on us. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.